the shoulder?
Humerus.
Humerus, good. What else? Scapula, clavicle. Good, that's basically it, those three bones, but we have bony parts on them that we want to make sure we pay attention to. But we'll start with the clavicle. So clavicle is super easy to find because it's superficial on everyone. Everyone should be able to palpate their own clavicle. If you start medial and work your way, it's sort of an S-shaped bone along the front of the shoulder. Okay, and then we said humerus. Humerus is super easy. You can give it a good squeeze, or you can do the shear thing like we did with femur. And you can palpate that all the way up to where it meets the glenoid. And then scapula is on the back. And with the scapula, you want to make sure you're palpating all the borders of it. So you have your lateral border, which is right here. And it comes down to the inferior border and then up the medial border. And then the superior border is actually pretty difficult to find because it's deep. So oftentimes we just find the spine of the scapula. And people think that's the superior border, but it's not, you're on the spine. So that's bony, it's a pretty bony part on most people. Okay, spine of the scapula. Good. What other things would we want to find for bones? The acromion process. Remember the AC joint is formed by the clavicle and the acromion process. So the acromion process is that hook. It's part of your scapula, but it's a hook that's sort of on the lateral part of your shoulder. So if you find the spine and keep following it till you get laterally, that's your acromion.
Can you show on this side, Erica, please?
Yeah. So here's her spine. Right here. There we go. Okay, so here's her spine. And then when I get here to the lateral side, this is her acromion right here. And it keeps coming around until it meets the clavicle. Okay, did everybody see that?
Can you
No?
go one way so that
Yeah. Let me just come out this way a little bit. So, spine of the scapula along the back. Everybody knows where that is. Right here. And then it becomes your acromion on the lateral part, like right in here, until it meets the clavicle. So it's basically like a little hook, like this. Now everybody's seen that? Okay. And then coracoid process is in the front, deeper and more inferior than your clavicle. So if you kind of find where the clavicle is or where the acromion is, just come down until you feel a bony part. So hers is like right there. And it is pretty deep. You have to push deep because you're going over her pec muscles. But that's basically the coracoid process. And it is tender on most people too. Okay. Anything else for bones that you guys can think of? Okay. Pardon? Yeah, you could do your greater and lesser tubercle. So basically, I usually start by finding the greater, which is on the more lateral side. So I start on the lateral humerus, work my way until I feel a bump. Like hers is right there. And then you'll feel a little bit of a valley, which is your bicipital groove where the bicep tendon runs. And then you might have to open her up a little bit to feel it. More medial to that will be the lesser tubercle. Okay? If you want to split this way and we can show these guys. So, I don't know, I should come for this shoulder. So, greater tubercle is on almost the lateral side, so feel laterally. You guys want to see? So lateral side, feel laterally until you feel a bump. So like right here. And then there's going to be a little valley. That's your bicep groove. And then the lesser is going to be just beside that. So it's two bumps and there's like a little ditch in between.
Sometimes you get confused with the acromion process with the greater tubercle.
Like if you're too high, it is below. Make sure you're below the acromion.
Okay.
It's on the femur, or on the humerus. Okay. And it's the same thing as like the greater trochanter. When you move the arm, you should be able to feel them moving around. If they're not moving, then you're probably not on them. You might be on the acromion then. Okay? Everybody's good with that? Then what do we have for articular in the shoulder? AC joint, good. What other joints? Glenohumeral, good. What else? One more. There's 3 joints in the shoulder. Yeah, SC, sternoclavicular. So the AC and the SC are pretty easy, especially SC. So you just find the clavicle, follow it along, and then it's where the clavicle and the sternum meet. So it's usually pretty prominent on most people. And then AC is at the opposite end, so again, find the clavicle, follow it out. Find your AC joint, basically find where the clavicle and the acromion meet. You'll feel like just a little bit of a divot there. That's how you know you're on the AC joint. Glenohumeral joint is a little bit hard. It's kind of like the hip joint. It's deep and it's covered with lots of muscles, but it's basically right in here. Okay, below your acromion, where the humerus meets the glenoid. And when I'm doing that, I'm really not palpating her glenohumeral. I'm in the right area, but like it's so deeper than all those muscles that it's really hard to get to. Okay, good. So that's basically joints. I usually just do AC and SC. What do we have for muscles? Biceps, good. What else? Trapezius, this one I think, good. Especially upper traps. What else? Tricep.
Rotator cuff muscle.
Huh?
Rotator cuff.
Rotator cuff, good. What are the 4 rotator cuff muscles? Supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, subscapularis. Good. What else do we have? Triceps, good. Delts, good. That's the big one I was thinking of. So delts are super easy. Most people have pretty prominent delts. They're basically kind of like a shoulder cover or a shoulder cap. And remember, there's 3 of them: the lateral, anterior, and posterior. So you can palpate those, just like this. Anterior. Somebody said biceps, so biceps attached below your elbow and work up. No, just half turn. There we go. So biceps are in here, and then remember the biceps tendon, the longhand tendon, runs through that groove that we just talked about in between the 2 tubercles. So you can palpate that. Triceps on the back side, you can palpate basically up until you get to the shoulder joint. So I don't think anybody said pecs, pec muscles, so they're in the front. Again, if you're working with a female, be careful not to touch anything. Make sure you explain what you're doing. But you can palpate along here, all the way to the sternum. Pec minor starts at the coracoid, so right in here. So if you find the coracoid and then just go a little bit below it, that would be pec minor. Oftentimes I'll be tender on people, like right in there. Traps, so upper traps are basically blanket like this. So you can just even give it a squeeze. Remember we talked about the trap squeeze when you're doing urgent scenarios? So that's your traps, and then they come up to the back of the neck, too. Rotator cuff. So supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and teres minor you can all palpate. You can palpate subscapularis, but you have to go through the armpit. So I'm not going to show you that. So you can just pretend you don't have to palpate subscapularis. But these are usually pretty easy to find too, because you find where your bony landmarks are, so you know where the spine of your scapula is, and just superior to that, in that fossa, is your supraspinatus. Okay? So just superior to the spine of the scapula. And infra is just inferior from it. So again, find the spine, move inferior, palpate through here. Okay, teres attaches onto the lateral border of the scapula, so again, find that and feel in there. Oftentimes this will be tight. Okay. Something else we didn't say was the lats. Lats are a huge muscle, kind of run all along here. So you can just palpate through here to find the lats. Anything else?
Rhomboids at all, or?
Yeah, you could do rhomboids. So rhomboids are on the medial border of the scapula. and go to the spine. Okay. I don't think we ever talked about levator scapula, did we, in your notes? So that's basically a muscle that starts at the superior part of your scapula and comes up into your neck. So it runs along here. If you guys are on this side, you can see it's like from right here, her scapula, superior part of her scapula, down in here, and it helps to elevate the scapula. So it'll often be tight. So you can palpate that one. Serratus anterior is another one. I know we talked about this one. It's kind of along the side of your rib cage. So a good way to find it, hold your arm, push into my hand. Just keep your arm straight, like you're pushing your fist into my hand. Good. So she's pushing straight forward. That's going to fire up her serratus. So I can feel it along here, and then relax. Then it goes quiet. It's mushy. Okay, push. Good. Then it becomes tight. So it's just kind of along in here. Looks like fingers, or kind of follows her ribs. Okay. Anything else? No, everybody's good with those? Okay, so that's shoulder. Elbow